Welcome to Analysis in Chains with Nathan and Neal. I'm Nathan Williams. With me is Neal Kierans. We'll be your hosts today. Check us out at analysisinchains.com. You can listen to us on Podbean, on iTunes, or whatever your favorite podcast program or app is. If you like it, don't forget to share. Now, let's take a look at today's subject, which is what, Neal?
Well, Nathan, is Neo the one? There is a lot of hype about this. There's a lot of hype about Neo these days, so we're here to investigate, is the hype worth it? Could this really disrupt the blockchain world as people say it does?
It looks interesting. I mean, we've been doing some research. I did my own independent research on this too. I went on the Neo subreddit. I was asking around why people got into it, what they thought. Definitely an interesting subject. Before we get started, I wanted to just mention a couple of things, some housekeeping here, Neal. We got our first fan mail. We got some fan mail from since our last episode, since we started announcing our email address, which is info@analysisinchains.com. And we had a guy call in from Brazil. Has loved our show, had some comments. He mentioned that he sees Bitcoin as more of an exchange token. So it sort of takes elements of cryptocurrency and elements of security and is halfway in between. And I thought that was an interesting point, that it's a medium of exchange, but maybe not yet at a point for everyday currency usage. So thank you very much for writing in for that.
Potential controversial viewpoint for all the people who see Bitcoin as a potential replacement for fiat currency. But I think it does highlight what a lot of these tokens and coins are a form of exchange. And some of these coins, you could say, maybe do have the potential to replace fiat currency, but some of them, like Ethereum and Neo, are more of an exchange token for a system that that must integrate with other systems and transact data between other systems. So with Bitcoin, I think it's still up in the air. It's still kind of trying to decide what it really is. But I think with Ethereum and Neo, I think they're the areas I'm particularly excited about, because they have the real big potential to really disrupt the world with applications that they can be used for.
Absolutely. I wanted to also mention very quickly, I got a message from a friend of mine who works with the Government of Canada, sent me a little update that their blockchain working group is well underway to working towards a white paper. No, it's interesting that they're examining the benefits and risks to the Government of Canada associated with blockchain, and they're expecting the draft to be available by October 27th. So this is
nice.
So this is interesting in that we're seeing more and more official government business from various governments looking at and examining the effect of blockchain on the government, on the industry, and that this group has set a date for their recommendations, and their white paper is just more signs of this moving forward. So,
but I would say government involvement is a form of disruption in itself, because a lot of these coins came about more because of an alternative to fiat currency. But now we're seeing governments wanting a part of this, and that could really disrupt what's out there, because it becomes a question of, okay, these coins, will they be used, or will governments come up with their own alternatives that will be adopted by citizens? So I think that this,
like the Australian government's trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's going to be very, very exciting. The more governments get involved, because this is such a fluid, dynamic space right now, trying to determine what does all of this mean. And it's exciting.
But it's interesting as well, given that this whole thing started back with Bitcoin, when everyone was an anarchist and wanted to try and get away from government institutions controlling the currency. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Sure. Truly the back and forth.
Sure, for sure.
All right. So, Neal, Let's talk about Neo, Neal.
So I'm very excited about Neo. We know it had a huge price surge recently. I think it's because of the switch from Ant shares to Neo, and I guess it's like Ant shares 2.0. And I think one of the main reasons people start investing heavily in this was because it's a lot like Ethereum in terms of how it's set up, but it comes with a lot more advantages in terms of how it operates. So it can do up to like 10,000 transactions per second, which is kind of crazy. And also is more flexible in terms of languages, because people don't have to just learn one language that Ethereum is based on. They can, write on whatever code they've ever learned. I mean, used to learning for 5-10 years. So that means I think it's going to attract a lot more people around the world to start using Neo. And obviously, China is one of the main places in the world that's really taken to blockchain. And so if you have a lot of the Chinese startups really use Neo instead of Ethereum, then you can see why the Neo price will start to surge, because it could potentially be one of the main building blocks of the blockchain economies that we're going to be seeing in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, I had never heard of Neo when we had started. I'm sort of coming into this fresh, and maybe if there are some people out there who don't know, Neo is essentially Chinese Ethereum.
Yeah.
It was. It's been endorsed by the Chinese government. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct.
That is a vague area, because what really kind of like set off this boom in price for Neo was that one of the main guys involved with it announced a partnership with the Chinese institution. But then the tweet was deleted.
So I didn't know that.
Obviously something like that can really set off speculators. Yeah. So the thing is that obviously it's very difficult for these coins to announce big initiatives or big plans, because it can really play in the hands of speculators and then price out people who really want to get involved. So yeah, it's always hard to know what's true in the crypto world, but I'm sure there's no smoke without fire.
Fair enough. But anyway, it's very similar in operation to Ethereum, because it's got two different types of coins. You've got your Neo, and then you've got your gas. Your gas pays for your transactions. But what's interesting is that the Neo itself stakes gas. So as you hold Neo in your account, you have the right to claim gas, which is a separate token, which can then pay for Neo transactions. It supports smart contracts. You can build on top of the platform your own application, your own tokens. In my research, I saw the main point of difference was in the algorithm underlying it. So, for example, Bitcoin and Ethereum are proof of work algorithms. They make computers solve a cryptographic puzzle in order to have the right to form a block, and to get incentivized, you have to give cryptocurrency to the computers that solves the block. Neo operates slightly differently. They use what's called a DBFT algorithm, or a distributed Byzantine. I've forgotten what the F stands for. Anyway, fault tolerance, yes. Distributed Byzantine fault tolerance. Here I wanted to sound smooth. And it's a trade-off, right? You're trading off improved speed and scale versus the need to trust. So essentially the main difference between this and Ethereum is that in Neo you have certain computers that are designated as bookkeepers. They've got a certificate, they're trusted by the company, and they have the right to make the blocks. And because those computers have the right to make the blocks, anyone who owns Neo has the right to vote for which bookkeeper they want to make the block. So the advantage is it moves much faster because you're trusting these centralized computers. Not just anyone can contribute to making the blocks. It is actually more fault tolerant than something like Ethereum. It can tolerate about a third of its servers being malicious, whereas Ethereum can tolerate about 25% of its servers being malicious. But the trade-off is you've got to trust the company. You've got to trust that the people at the middle who are issuing the certificates are acting in everyone else's best interests. And so that's sort of a different use case and a different theory than
Nathan,
Ethereum and Bitcoin were founded under.
Neal will be more or less politically charged than Bitcoin? Because with Bitcoin, it's just politics seems to be an inherent part of the currency. But with Neal, do you think it's just going to be, a bit more like oil? It just works like a machine. That's it? Or do you think politics will creep into it?
How do I say this? It's in China, and China is not known for, being hands off with its industry, with any industry. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination in Southeast Asia, but we already saw that he's tweeting and deleting maybe yes, maybe no, that the Chinese government's already involved, right?
Yeah. But when I say political, I don't mean government political. I mean amongst its base, those using Neal, because with Bitcoin, the politics is more amongst the people who maintain Bitcoin. You have developers, you have the miners. There's lots of ideals as what is the right direction for Bitcoin. Do you think with the way it's set up in Neal that it's has a risk to that? Because I'm under the impression that because of the way it's set up, it's a lot more functional, and it's like, this is the way it's set up. This is going to help us build applications. This is going to help us build an ecosystem, and therefore we're going to leave the politics out of it. That's my impression of Neal, and I think that's why it has a lot of potential.
I think you're absolutely right, but again, we're still in early days.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
right.
Neal is just starting to take off. I think it's sitting around $44 per coin, something like that, right?
I will tell you now. It's
so it's something to that effect. 38.
Yeah.
All right. So it's starting to take off. We're seeing more and more advances there. When I was doing research on this, I went into the subreddit to ask people what they thought. And my impression from those interactions was that it's a very tight-knit community, that people are excited about the technology, that people are on board with the vision that the founders have, and they identify it partly because it is a Chinese origin company, and people that I talk to really identify with getting behind a Chinese cryptocurrency instead of perhaps an American one.
I think that's a good point, actually.
And so as a result, and also because you have sort of the centralized server system that's controlled by the access is controlled by the founders, by the company. You have to. The founders own about 50% of the Neo that's available, and so that means that there is centralized control. So, on the one hand, that will keep things in line. It will prevent it from getting too political amongst a group like Bitcoin has been, because Bitcoin, everyone owns their own stuff. They don't have to answer to anyone. There is a vision, but it's not centralized and communicated by a central authority. It's just sort of shared by a loose association of people who've invested time and money into it. So yeah, in one sense, I think you're right. But I think in another sense, in the long term, we could very well see it get very heated, because people might have a different vision as to where it should go. Or people when they feel a sense of ownership, they would feel more strongly usually.
No, I think actually made a very good point there,
because in the wrong direction.
Because with these technologies, they're so new, and every so often there's a new let's say, take on blockchain, and it's like, wow, this has real potential. And in the case of Neo, that more centralized aspect, if you want to call it that, I think that will help it develop long term. But in saying that, going back to your point, is that the early adopters may want to take the best parts of Neo and come up with their own. It's similar to what we've seen with, say, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum Classic. I guess that will always be the risk. And when it comes to investment in a lot of these cryptocurrencies, this is always like the inherent risk, is that these things have big potential, but it's so hard to tell how it could all play out. Because when I look at Ethereum and Neo, I see their coins or their tokens as a form of exchange between other systems. Because so many applications or products could be built on Neo, and a big part of the exchange or the communication between these could be the actual token. So I went to a talk not so long ago, I think I mentioned this before, and they talked about the potential of mixing AI with Ethereum. And they were saying how the tokens themselves will be a form of communication between different systems. So say you're in a driverless car, and that's primarily operated by AI. That car could be communicating with other cars and be using the tokens as a form of communication or transaction to help understand what's happening between the different, say, entities that surrounds it, that always communicates with. So it's always hard to really determine, okay, does this price make sense in the long run? Because it's so hard to know when these companies do develop that they depend on Neo and Ethereum, how will they use Neo and Ethereum? I think that's the big question long term, that it's so hard to tell. It's like, yes, Neo is going to be in demand, but how will the tokens be used? And does the price really reflect how they will be used? And I think that's the big question. And I think that's, for me, will always be hard to invest in some particular cryptocurrency.
As a startup guy, I got to tell you, I really don't want to discount the speculative value, because it's not a certain component of speculative value is hype, for sure. Absolutely, no question, and it's probably a large portion. But there's also the visionary value, the idea that we see this will be groundbreaking, this will shake up industries, this will change everything. It's really hard to predict. Which one's going to come out on top, but it's not impossible to make a good guess when you see something like this. And when you see a cryptocurrency that's got good fundamentals, a good white paper, that has the backing of a tight community that really believes in it, and that has the potential for other systems to be built on top of it, then I'm not going to say that it's foolproof, but it's certainly a bit more confidence-inducing than just a regular token.
I would counter that. Like, as a data analyst, it's like, I feel like when I look at a lot of these cryptocurrencies, there's not much feedback in terms of metrics to help you understand where the value is. Now, with Ethereum and Neo, there's huge potential for metric feedback, where I'm sure in the future we'll know how many systems are dependent on Neo, how many systems are dependent on Ethereum. Because if you look at the price of oil, say if there's a new industry that everyone wants to use their products and they're very oil dependent, well, naturally the price of oil goes up. But when it comes to Neo and Ethereum, compared to other cryptocurrencies, we can actually, I'm sure they can actually measure, okay, how how important are these systems? Like, how dependent are other applications? How dependent are they on them? And I think once you start to get those metrics, then we're going to start to really see, okay, these coins are valuable, just like how oil was valuable during the Industrial Revolution. So I like, that's the thing I'm really looking out for. And I think once those metrics come back, I think they could be very, very disruptive, but also help stabilize price prediction and people's appreciation for these type of currencies.
No, that's fair. I want to throw in sort of the counterpoint to that, of course.
We'll be countering each other all day.
But I'm just thinking, what competition is there for them?
Well, I would say between Ethereum and Neo, like they're the biggest two players in this space in cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, and in a certain way they're big competitors, but in a different way they're not, because Neo is sort of addressing a slightly different problem, a problem of scalability. They're geographically in Southeast Asia. Whereas Ethereum's more tried and true, but it's proof of work. It's aim at being trustless, and so in a way it's slightly different. I wanted to bring one other little question up to you, Neal. Neal, have you downloaded the wallet?
Which wallet? The Neo wallet?
The Neo wallet,
multiple wallets, but I do not yet have the Neo wallet. Do you have one?
Okay, so the wallet I downloaded is called Neon.
Oh.
So the Neon wallet, and it's the process actually for setting it up is rather simple. You just download it, you click a button, and it gives you a private key and a public key,
fantastic.
where you've got to save it immediately. Otherwise, it will forget. It doesn't give you a seed. It doesn't, like, if you forget it, it's gone forever. And which is fine because your wallet's empty at the very beginning, but you only access your Neo from that private key, and you're only ever shown it once. So, but so they've solved the setup hurdle. It's painless to set it up, but it is painful if you don't remember to save it. So, because you'll never get it back. Anyway, I guess we're nearing our time. I wanted to mention that if you liked this exposition on Neo, by all means, give us a call on info@analysisandchains.com. And by call, I mean email.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is 2017.
2017. Who calls anymore? And I wanted to mention as well, as I did on Monday, that we've started our own crypto token called Nutshells. We haven't completely decided what we're going to do with them, but think of it as a rewards program. You get to participate in the Nathan and Neal show, and we show you our love. So if you want some Nutshells, first way to get them is to write into us. info@analysisandchains. Tell us some comments, some topics, something interesting, and maybe if we read your stuff on air, then maybe we'll send you some tokens, some Nutshells. And they're available on the Waves platform, so you'll need a Waves wallet. And also, if you want to help us explore Neo, we'll set up the Neo wallet, and maybe you can give some to us, and we'll tell you if it works. Isn't that great? Isn't that a great idea? Don't you want to feel like you're part of this?
Okay, Nathan. So with Neo, do you think I'm gonna ask you like what your prediction here is? Do you think this could be the death of Ethereum because of Neo?
No way.
No way. That's a bit too binary.
In looking at Neo, I see high hopes. I think it looks really good. I think it's going to become enormous. I think we're going to see the price take off. We're going to see more and more companies build on it. But I think it's just addressing a different clientele. It is a competitor, but it's sort of like, is Coke the death of Pepsi?
Yeah, very good.
It's like, no.
Yeah. It's like it just offers something slightly different, and it's like any product on this planet. Like it's good to have different options. It's good to have different choice, depending on the different developers out there and people with the different viewpoints of where cryptocurrencies are going. But I think it's going to be a very strong competitor to Ethereum. We could potentially see, East versus West when it comes to blockchain, Ethereum versus Neo. But I think it's going to be very, very exciting. In terms of price, I think it's going to be very hard to tell which will be the most valuable, because the way people are predicting Neo price is based on Ethereum price. They're thinking, okay, this is the volume of Ethereum today. This is the volume of Neo today. So Neo has the opportunity to climb up by 10 times based on volume. I think that's the incorrect way to look at things. I think that people should just look at this long term and say, you know what, this has a lot of potential to be a very dominant player. And I'm sure in 10 years' time, Neo will be definitely one of the cryptocurrencies that's still standing.
That's our show. Thanks for tuning in to Analysis and Chains with Nathan and Neal. Check us out at analysisandchains.com, on iTunes, Podbean, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep hashing.